Okay, so we are live on Facebook. I'm Charlsie, Agro, one of the hosts of CBC's Marketplace, and I'm joined this afternoon by dietitian Jen Sygo. Hello, Jen.
Hi, Charlsie. How are you?
Good to see you again. So if you caught our show on Friday night, or perhaps on Sunday or even on Monday, you probably spotted Jen Sygo. She was key in helping us with our superfoods investigation. So if you didn't catch the show, we did look at coconut water, chia seeds, and quinoa. And now we would like to take your questions on superfoods. So maybe there is something that you would like to know about what we did, or maybe you have your own questions about your own health and nutrition for Jen. She does a lot of work with a number of different clients. Let's just let people know what your expertise is.
Sure. So I'm a registered dietitian. I consult for a number of different organizations. Right now we are in the clinic that I work at, Cleveland Clinic, Canada, in downtown Toronto. I also practice in sport nutrition, so I work for a number of organizations.
Yeah, a few of which maybe you've heard of, like the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Toronto Raptors. I think Team Canada is also on your list.
Well, we met some of the sprinters and the throwers and jumpers that we work with up at York University with the Canadian track and field team.
So, Jen, one of the things that people were really taken with from the investigation, I heard a lot about it on Twitter, surprised a couple of our CBC hosts as well, was quinoa. So a lot of people believe that quinoa is a source of protein, and there is some protein in quinoa, but just tell us a little bit about the real deal when it comes to quinoa.
Sure. Well, quinoa is a pseudo-cereal, meaning that it's not quite a traditional cereal grain. Cereal grains would be things like wheat and oats that many of us are familiar with. Quinoa is a bit different, so it's from a slightly different botanical family. And what that means is it has a little bit of different properties than some of the other grains that we have known over the years, like wheat. In that sense, it is higher in protein than the oats and the wheats and so on. But we've sort of maybe distorted the image of it a little bit, that it is a high protein food. So to give you an example, a cup of cooked quinoa provides somewhere around 8 grams of protein. And that's certainly something. It's better than zero, I guess you could say, when you're looking for protein-rich foods to help build muscle or help us feel full. But by comparison, we'll get in a cup of milk an equal 8 grams of protein. But in a single serving of, say, a chicken breast or a can of tuna or some type of meat-based product, we can easily get 25 to 30 grams of protein, even in just a palm-sized serving.
Right. So the idea then is that quinoa is perhaps not as significant a source of protein as people might think.
And I think to take that even a step farther, to get those 8 grams of protein, you need to consume about 220 calories worth of quinoa. And so that's the question is that an efficient way to get our protein?
When you're getting that many calories. These are your handy-dandy serving cups. So this is a cup. That's a cup of quinoa. That seems like kind of a lot of quinoa.
You'd have to, yeah, exactly. And I think you can look at this two ways. You can say, well, if I'm going to have to get, say, maybe 20 grams of protein at a meal, which is what we're often recommending. So you're going to have to eat more than double this portion. And at that point, you've eaten more than your meal's worth of calories just from the quinoa, and you haven't had anything else. Yeah.
So the questions are coming in, and we really would love to hear from you. So please find us on Facebook and send Jen your questions. Clearly, she knows her stuff. So Michael Artendale is asking, why is it that the government cannot shut down the companies that make misleading claims? It's a good question, Michael. I can tell you what we learned is that it is Health Canada that is the regulator, so they make the rules, and then it's up to the CFIA to enforce them. So if you do see a label that you're concerned about, Michael, you should let the CFIA know. They are a complaints-based company. We did have a great example in our show. You may have seen Jen's reaction. It certainly caught her by surprise. But it seems like at least when the companies do learn about it, or in our example, they did correct the mistake. So unfortunately, Michael, the consumers, they do have to speak up. Anti-Raku is asking, oh, this is an interesting one, matcha. It's in a lot of drinks in particular. Is matcha actually good for you? Do you drink it?
I've had it. I don't go out of my way to drink it. I would say if anybody's wondering if there's any big superfoods in my diet on a regular basis. I mean, I eat a pretty normal balanced diet.
Yep.
So last night we made guacamole with fresh avocados, for example, and I love making my own granola. So yes, I mean, probably many of the superfoods make their way into my diet once in a while, like say green tea. But I don't necessarily go out of my way to eat any one of them all the time.
What's in matcha that would make it good?
So it's really, it's an antioxidant rich food.
Okay.
So we've talked about that before,
Yeah.
about the sort of the challenge we have in defining what antioxidants do in our body and whether you can translate observed effects, say in a cell culture, or maybe in an animal model, into effects in a human to prolong life. And so matcha is one of those ones that's caught in the land in between, where it has been used historically for vitality and health promotion. But the question is, do we know exactly how that vitality occurs? And is it something that we can translate for sure into an observable benefit to humans? We're not at that point yet.
Okay. This is a question from George Marx, who would like to know, great question, George, how much protein do you actually need in a day?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a big one. So there's two ways you can define that. There's something that's essentially been used for a long time called the DRIs, the dietary reference intakes.
Okay.
And essentially that gives you a grams per day target.
All right.
So you could take your weight in kilos. For Canadians, we use kilos, right? Which if you are still using pounds, which is fine, divide your weight in pounds by 2.2, that gives you kilos.
Okay.
And you multiply that by 0.8.
Okay.
If you want a simple number, multiply it by 1. So in other words, 1 gram per kilo body weight. So a 154-pound person, that's 70 kilos, they would need 70 grams of protein in a day.
Okay.
So that's what we used for a long time. The problem with that is you could, in theory, get all your protein at one meal or 2 meals. And now we understand that our bodies use protein best when it's spaced evenly throughout the day.
Okay.
So the more current recommendations being espoused by leading protein researchers, and this is not a Health Canada, this is sort of a let's talk about this discussion, is emphasizing about 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal.
Okay.
Rather than one big whopping total to spread out however you want during the day.
Speaking of protein, Tara Peters, great question. Greek yogurt, is it worth it?
Well, it's a great protein source, yeah.
Okay.
So, we don't need to eat meat. I mentioned meat-based foods, and I include in that poultry and fish off the top, but we don't want to be always eating meat-based proteins for environmental reasons, for health reasons. And Greek yogurt is a protein source that parallels that of many meat and fish-based foods.
Wow.
So for 3/4 of a cup, which is about a third of one of those tubs, these size tubs out there, you'll get about 18 grams of protein.
Wow.
So whole meals worth of protein, and usually in somewhere about 100 to 150 calories.
Okay. This is an interesting question. Hamad is asking, are there any superfoods that have been shown to meet their label claims and are recommended? So can you maybe pick, Jen, I mean, she did write the book on superfoods. Can you maybe pick one or two that you would say are perhaps good bang for your buck?
Sure. Kale is what kale is. I mean, the vitamin A and vitamin C contents of kale, not to mention vitamin K, folate, are really gigantic.
Okay.
I mean, epic. So, but I would say you don't have to necessarily buy into just kale. I mean, just because it has those whopping amounts, as I've talked about a lot, you can also get really large amounts in Swiss chard, spinach, arugula. So you could say kale, but I would say green leafy vegetables.
And one other?
Avocado.
Avocado. Okay, someone did tweet me a question about avocado. Just to reset with you, this is Jen Sygo, registered dietitian. She was featured prominently in our marketplace investigation into superfoods. You're watching us live on Facebook right now. If you do have questions for Jen or myself about our investigation, we would love to hear from you. And we're just asking Jen about superfoods that are worth it. You said kale and avocado. Someone else had tweeted me asking about avocado.
Yeah.
What is good in an avocado?
What isn't good in
how much
avocados?
should you have?
Yeah. Well, so this goes back to that sort of the question around the quinoa about calories, right?
Yep.
And I want everyone to be very aware of this, that just because a food has a lot of nutrition in it doesn't mean that it's low calorie.
Okay.
You can overeat foods that are super or very healthy for you. And avocados are an example of one where there's a ton of value in them. They're a huge source of what we call monounsaturated fats, which are the category of fats often associated with the Mediterranean diet's health benefits. As for example, olive oil is also a big source of monounsaturated fats.
The good fats.
The good fats. Yeah. They're also a great source of potassium, which is important for our heart health. They're outstanding in terms of fiber, really high in fiber, which you don't even realize because of that creamy texture. But they are giving you about 150 calories per half avocado. Ooh. So I do get clients who kind of go, oh my gosh, like I'm just eating them by the spoonful.
Right.
They're not quite on par with peanut butter in that regard, but they are a high fat food, and high fat means high calories. So we have to use them, I hate to use that dietitian term, but it's worth it here in moderation.
I was gonna say everything in moderation.
Yeah.
Okay, this is an interesting one. I'm going to show you this, Jen. Jen Farrow, are you familiar with, is it Isagenix and their superfood shakes?
Yeah. So, you know, maybe not speaking to one particular brand, but in general. So, so there's lots of different ways you can promote the use of a superfood. You can eat the food, certainly. You can, in theory, take a pill that maybe provides you with the vitamins or minerals that are found in a superfood or the antioxidants. Or what's common these days is a powder. So you essentially take a variety of different superfoods, you dry freeze them or dry them, freeze dry them, or some other drying process, and then you essentially powder them up and turn them into a pill or a powder that you can mix into a drink or as part of a protein shake.
So for people who are maybe less inclined to pursue meat or fish for protein sources, because there are a lot of vegetarians, vegans out there, can you suggest some protein sources that are non-meat, non-fish?
Sure. Yeah, so there's lots out there, but we mentioned in terms of ones that are still animal proteins, things like Greek yogurt, old-fashioned milk. Remember milk? Milk's a protein source. Cheese is a protein source. Cottage cheese is a very rich protein source. So that's sort of the dairy family. And then you have things like in the non-dairy family, eggs, which are still an animal food. And then in the plant-based protein family, the entire soy and tofu family. And then one that we as Canadians could do well to eat more of, which are we call them the pulses. That's your beans, your lentils, your chickpeas, which are terrific nutritionally, great for the environment, give us plant-based protein, and then on top of that, nuts and seeds.
Excellent. Okay. So hopefully that helped you out, Rebecca, because you were asking about protein forms for vegetarians. Philip is asking, are foods with charcoal in them healthy or even safe? Great question, Phil. I too have seen on Instagram the charcoal ice cream. What's the scoop?
Yes, so you know, I've actually had to take activated charcoal at one point. I have severe food allergies, and I one time in the hospital used to help me battle a severe reaction was given charcoal to drink. So the idea behind charcoal is that it essentially, for lack of a better word, it's a binder or blocker. So if you had to take charcoal, if you were, say, in a situation of an overdose, it would be to prevent that drug, or in this case, that food that I was allergic to from
into your system.
Exactly. So it may be used legitimately in an ER emergency type setting. Lately, it's been incorporated in this sort of realm of detox, this abstract term detox.
What could possibly be good? So what is it in the charcoal that's good for me?
So, well, it's more what it prevents from happening to you. So in theory, it's preventing bad toxins from accumulating in your body. It's nice in theory. The thing that concerns me greatly is that the whole point of charcoal is it prevents you from absorbing anything. So any good nutrition from the food that you're eating will be totally inhibited by consuming the charcoal with it. So I don't quite understand why we're trying to prevent ourselves from absorbing good nutrition.
So maybe a fun fad, but perhaps not functional. Okay, there you go, Philip. Sherry is asking, this is a great question, Sherry. What is the biggest mistake that you see people making when they try to eat healthier?
Well, these days, I'd say there are two. One we already alluded to when we talked about the avocados, which is taking all these foods that we say, we put the health halo, we've talked about the health halo on top of foods, and say, you know, this food is good for me. It's almonds, or it's avocado, or it's olive oil, or it's coconut oil, and they must be good for me so I can eat as much as I want. And I've seen people do that where they're actually gaining weight by making their diet healthier because they're eating unlimited amounts or larger amounts of foods that are higher in calorie. There's still calories in these foods. The other thing I would say we want to be careful of is obsession. Is that, and this is something that's being documented in some of the medical literature out there, that, you know, healthy eating is good. Obsession with healthy eating can be harmful. And we are seeing that with people who it's becoming almost a source of anxiety. It's like, if I don't eat perfectly healthy, then I might, now, and then they can't go out. They can't go to restaurants. They can't socialize.
I know, before we sat down, I felt like I had to confess to Jen that I ate a muffin. It was a Raisin Bran muffin, but I hear that, right? Because we're trying to make good choices, so it can be when you feel like maybe you didn't make the perfect choice, like a little bit of fear, like, oh, I shouldn't have.
And, you know, everyone has those moments saying, geez, I overdid it, you know, too much at the holiday dinner, or shouldn't have had that extra bite of dessert. But I think there's a line between that and something that's a very deep-seated anxiety that we are seeing. The trend seems to be increasing. Some individuals are becoming very vulnerable to that.
Okay. We have some more questions, and if you're just joining us, we are live on Facebook right now with dietitian Jen Sygo. She was featured in our superfoods investigation that we did just this past weekend on Marketplace. Jen, another question, this one coming from YouTube. So, what was the conclusion for chia seeds? So if you saw our program, or if you missed it, we did look at chia seeds and break down the nutrition, what you're actually getting. And one of the suggestions that Jen made when it came to chia was to consider flax. So let's just recap for people what the deal is with chia and why maybe consider something else.
So chia seeds are interesting. If you're not familiar with them, these are like the chia pet that you may have seen with the growing and the green coming out of the terracotta plant. Yeah, no kidding, that's the same seed. And they've been touted as being healthy for particularly their fiber content and their omega-3 content. And I think the things I want to convey with this chia, but also a lot of these claims, is that, for example, when it comes to the omega-3 content of chia seeds, they are reasonably rich in them, but the omega-3s in a plant-based food are not necessarily as well used by the body as omega-3s from fish.
Right.
So we want to be very careful when we see something that's plant-based and touts, it has huge amounts of that. Take caution.
Okay.
Flax seeds have also been touted for having a very high amount of omega-3s in them. Again, plant-based, so not all that well used by the body. But when we actually look at the research out there, the chia seed, it's unclear if they actually do much to lower our cholesterol or improve our heart health, which surprises me because they are very high in fiber, and in theory they should. So there are questions as yet unanswered. Whereas we have very good research on flax seeds saying that it does contain the right types of fiber that help our heart, not to mention keep our bowels moving. I don't think one is necessarily to be eaten and the other to be ignored, but it's sort of funny that we were all like, flax, and then one day it was like, no, chia. And I think they can both fit.
The fads really get, like, you hear something gets in your zeitgeist, and then all of a sudden it's like, I gotta.
Yeah.
So great question. The other interesting thing that we learned from chia seeds was also Marketplace. We're a consumer show after all. It's not cheap. Flax was considerably cheaper than chia. So we'll move right along. We've got another question from Yadira Mendoza, who's asking, which are the best foods for someone who is trying to lose weight but has a few physical limitations?
Okay, so, well, this goes back to the idea of diet versus exercise. You know, should we be more active to lose weight or control our weight, or should we be looking at making changes to our diet? And the answer is, of course, it's a bit of both.
Okay.
But I would say the research is drifting in the direction that diet may be have a bigger role to play in weight management than activity. So even if you're inactive, it doesn't mean that you can't manage your weight. And the reason why exercise may not be the best way to control your weight on its own is because as we exercise more, our appetite goes up.
Yes.
So that isn't to say exercise isn't valuable. I want to be very clear.
Yes.
We know it's crucial for your health for so many reasons you could barely count, but at the very least, feeling well, healthy bones, healthy heart, and on it goes. But if you can't exercise a lot, what sort of food should we incorporate? This is going to be old news here, but it's still true, fruits and vegetables.
Okay.
So there's a principle out there in nutrition called volumetrics, and that is that foods that have a high water content in them, which fruits and vegetables do, give the brain a disproportionate sense of fullness.
Oh.
So your brain goes, woo, that was a lot of food there. But in fact, the calories are relatively low.
Right.
Whereas on the other hand, things like nuts and seeds pack a lot of calories into a tiny
amount
space, as does dried fruit. and then you say, well, that wasn't much, and you keep eating.
Sure.
So incorporating volumetrics principles into your diet by eating fruits and vegetables at every meal, and other volumetric foods like yogurts, soups, and stews in your diet that have a lot of water in them is a really easy way to control your weight.
Okay. So Yi Feng is asking, many people love barbecue. I barbecued last night. I feel like it may be the last night.
It was
in
beautiful
some time.
weather.
It was. But recent research indicates that barbecue might trigger cancer.
Yeah.
Oh, do you agree?
Yes. There's some evidence to say that this is true, but there's things you can do to modify your risk.
Okay.
So the concern with barbecue is that when you put, especially a protein-based food, on a grill with high heat, you produce certain compounds that are carcinogenic, called heterocyclic amines, HCAs. And it's a reaction between essentially the parts of the protein and the iron, particularly in red meat, and the high heat. So it's particularly where you see the black charring.
Yeah.
So right there you can think of one way you can minimize your risk of producing these. Right, is if it's charred, don't eat it.
I'm going to tell my husband you said that.
It might be disappointing for some people. The other thing that's really interesting is it turns out if you cook those meat-based foods with foods that are high in not just antioxidants, but herbs and spices, as well as things like marinades, they seem to protect the meat from the production of the HCAs.
Wow.
So if you're going to have a steak or whatever, put some rosemary on top of it, add some garlic, use a little bit of olive oil.
Okay.
Don't char grill it to the point of, blackened, and don't eat it all that often. Have it as moderation.
Interesting. Wow, great question. I'm glad you knew that. I really had not heard that. So if you're just joining us, once again, we're live on Facebook with Jen Sygo, dietitian. She works with a number of different individual clients, but also some teams that you may have heard of, including the Leafs, the Raptors, and Team Canada. She's answering your questions on superfoods because she did write the book on superfoods. We have more questions. So, Seamus is asking, there are many protein powders on the market. What characterizes a good product, and when is it best to take them? Sure,
yeah, protein powders are one I get asked about a lot, especially when you work in sport, but a lot of people are using them even for non-sport purposes just to meet their protein needs.
Right.
I would say always we want to try and use food first when we can.
Okay.
So protein powders can be a benefit when, either the food sources are not available, the person doesn't like them, or sometimes we just need a quick option in the morning when we're making our smoothie. The main things to know are that if you are after specifically muscle building, if that's your aim, performance, or maybe in an aging population, someone who's having issues with strength as they get older, it seems as though whey protein, whey being W-H-E-Y, this is the one that's derived from dairy sources, is the fastest acting protein that we are aware of right now in terms of building muscle.
Okay, so if you want muscle, you want whey.
You want whey, exactly. On the other hand, there are many other proteins out there on the market, and a lot of people now are moving towards plant-based proteins. So we're seeing pumpkin seed-based protein, seeing pea-based proteins, and the research says they may not be quite as effective for muscle building, but the difference isn't huge. So for my money, if you prefer to go down a plant-based road, which a lot of people are choosing to do, you can absolutely explore those proteins, and that's fine. They don't always taste as good. So you might need to add some flavorful stuff into that smoothie.
So we've been talking about protein, and earlier you gave us some numbers about how to figure out how much protein you actually need, because I think so many of us are like protein, and we don't actually know how much we need. So Michael Winter wrote in on Twitter. He said he did the math, and he's surprised because when he did the math, he would need 65 grams of protein. Mine would be 54. Thank you, Michael, because I did weigh myself on television. So I appreciate you crunching the numbers for me. So that sounds like a lot for me. So can we just go back through the numbers and figure it out?
So I was using 1 gram per kilo just for the simple math, but the actual dietary reference intake in Canada is 0.8 grams per kilo.
Okay.
But let's just use 1 for the sake of rounding. But you have to remember, so if I was saying 50 odd grams of protein per day, then that would translate to kind of 15-ish grams per meal. The average Canadian eats somewhere around 8 grams at breakfast, which a cup of milk on its own will give you.
Okay.
They do somewhere around 12 to 15 at lunch, and then about 50 at dinner. Yeah. So as soon as you do like a steak, a large chicken breast, anything that's sort of meat-based and a good healthy size, you could easily be grabbing yourself 40 grams of protein in one sitting. And if it's a big 16-ounce porterhouse, it could be way more than that. So that's where we maybe have gone a little bit wrong, is that we've been doing this sort of bottom heavy eating, all of our protein and our calories coming at night.
Okay.
So one of the things I work on with people is maybe having a more protein rich breakfast,
Sure.
throwing an egg in or some yogurt and feeling more satisfied. And then at dinner, you only need about the size of the palm of your hand.
Yeah, that's the other thing, right? Like palm of your hand is not,
size of your head.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully that helps Michael kind of clear it up for you a little bit. Emily Cabral is commenting, oh, this is great because I'm a huge fruit fiend. Emily says, I love fruit. How many fruits a day is too many?
Right. So it's interesting because there are weight loss programs out there that actually consider fruit to be free, which it's not. It definitely contains calories, but their thinking is that we're better off to encourage people to eat fruit because the calories are still relatively low. Now, I don't totally agree with that because the 60 to 100 calories per fist-sized serving, that's about a cup, that most fruit contains can add up if you eat a lot of it.
Right.
For the average person, somewhere between 2 and 5 servings a day will fit for most people. So 2 to 5 fist-sized servings.
2 to 5 fist size, okay.
Okay, and that would be based on your calorie needs. So a very small, older female who's inactive, maybe 2 is fine. For someone who's younger and larger body frame, larger weight, and more active, maybe it's 5. I've seen clients who eat huge amounts. They're eating 2 pineapples a day and a whole melon and all sorts of things. So yes, you can have too much, but I'd say the vast majority of Canadians could afford to eat more.
Really? Okay. So Kayla Rain is asking, this is a great question because I've noticed this too popping up more and more. So Kayla's asking, Jen, what are your thoughts on marketing on GMOs, processed foods, and factory farm meat and dairy? How would you recommend people shop in grocery stores based on marketing? Maybe we don't have to tackle all of those.
Yeah, that's big. Yeah, you got an hour.
GMO I see on loads of stuff now.
Yeah, so this is a tricky one. I think the first message I would give anyone is that taking care of your diet and eating quality foods, and by that I mean foods that are closer to their original state from the earth, in other words, minimally processed. Right there you've done the majority of the work to take care of your health. So getting really stressed about the smaller details for a lot of people is probably not doing them a lot of good, not to mention increasing the cost of the food drastically.
Okay.
So I would say if you look at your diet and you look around when you're getting to the checkout line and you say most of the food in this cart is from the outside of the grocery store, which is where your fruits, your veggies, it's where you find your eggs, your fish, and so on, is from the outside of the grocery store, doesn't necessarily have ingredient lists as long as my arm, you're generally going to be okay there. Okay. If you get to bed on time and work out a few times a week and have good relationships, like that is the majority of health. From there, some people may go up the ladder a little bit and start looking at things like, and I think it is important to have discussions about how the animals are treated that we are ultimately consuming, how the fruits and vegetables we're eating are being raised, and I think those are vital, vital questions. But I think at the end of the day, I would say stick to basics first. Okay. In other words, I wouldn't worry about organic cookies. Right. They're still cookies at the end of the day.
It's true, right? Because just because it says organic doesn't mean.
And people, they love to sort of qualify that with me. They're like, I had a cookie last night, but it was organic.
It was organic. Right. Okay, so if you're just joining us, we are live on Facebook. We're also broadcasting on YouTube. Thank you all for sending your questions. This is great. Jen Sygo is a registered dietitian. She was on our Marketplace Superfoods episode where we looked into coconut water, chia seeds, and quinoa. Thank you all for your questions because we're getting loads, so we'll just keep on trucking. So this is from Wendy McGonigal Rish. She's asking, I'm sorry, Wendy, if I mispronounced your name, coconut oil. Yes or no?
Maybe. Fine. I'm fine with it being used. The premise behind coconut oil, why it was controversial and remains to a degree controversial, is because it is very high in saturated fats. Okay. And when I was coming up as a dietitian, we were taught and we were teaching people that saturated fats were directly linked with heart disease, and that when you fed people a diet high in saturated fat, you'd contribute to their cholesterol going up, and then eventually their risk of having a cardiovascular event.
The bad fats.
The bad fats, exactly. So things have changed a little bit. We now understand that saturated fats are perhaps not, it's not reasonable to demonize them the way we have.
Okay.
The mistake that has been made is that when a person takes saturated fats out of their diet and they replace them with, say, low fat, high sugary, refined carbohydrate foods, the effect on cardiovascular health is at best no improvement, and you might even be, depending on whose research you're looking at, a little worse off.
Okay.
We still know that the fats from things like nuts and seeds and fish seem to be the most relevant, the most beneficial for your heart.
Okay.
But at least we understand now that saying all saturated fat is bad, especially if it leads to us going and saying, well, so sugar is fine, or I can eat as many low-fat, sweetened foods as I want. That's where the message got confused.
Okay.
So taking it all the way back to coconut oil, as a saturated fat rich food, it can raise your cholesterol. You have to be aware of that.
Right.
But does it actually contribute to risk of cardiovascular disease?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. So I would say use it as part of a mixed diet. I wouldn't use it as the only fat.
Sure.
I would use that in combination with, say, olive oil.
Okay. Someone else is asking if you saw the show, one of the things that Jen very usefully suggested was chia seeds. Perhaps instead consider flax. Someone's asking, does it help, nutritionally speaking, if you grind them up?
Yeah, so this is the question with the muddy research on chia seeds, is whether the issue is the whole chia seed versus the ground chia seed. We know from flax that the whole flax seed is virtually non-digestible by the human digestive system. You pretty much have to grind your flax seeds or else literally chew them one at a time.
Okay, that would take a long time.
Right?
They're pretty small.
They're a little small.
Yeah.
And this makes sense. Seeds were designed to be pretty robust creatures. They have to be able to survive in the elements.
Yep.
And then eventually they germinate and off they go. So they're tough little critters. So we have to do a bit of work to break them down and get some of the nutrition out of them, which is why some people eat sprouted products from seeds and so on. So so in the case of chia seeds, it very well might be that a ground chia seed is more effective for overall, whether that's digestive health or heart health, than a whole chia seed.
Just because you're not passing the whole seed right away.
But this goes back to the idea of soaking the chia seed. Is that that is another way that you can potentially access its nutrition a bit better.
Alicia was talking about that. You like put them in almond milk and then you wake up in the morning and they kind of have that weird jelly
They're really cool. Yeah.
I'm gonna do it. I'll let you know.
Chia pudding.
Yeah.
Very trendy.
Okay, so this is a question from Shannon. Shannon Parker wants to know, kombucha, does it live up to the hype for GI health?
Oh, good question. So kombucha is a fermented drink.
It's kind of weird. People grow their own. This is like a new thing now. If you're into food, you probably already know this. It's old news, but it's a yeast, right? It grows.
Yeah. So it's and I mean you can see, it's fascinating to see some of the starters and watch the kombucha. You got all sorts of the byproducts on top and it's interesting stuff. Anyway, kombucha, what is it? It's part of this family of foods we consider to be the fermented food family that's gotten really popular. So
for gut health,
gut health, exactly.
So for people who are learning about gut health for the first time, basically you want to have a balance and good bacteria in your gut.
We understand now that the bacteria, not just in our gut, but in our whole body, on our skin, and everywhere, has a huge impact on our health.
Okay.
We don't fully understand yet, and this goes back to whether kombucha is a good idea or not, exactly how to make permanent or very long-standing changes in the health of those bacteria.
Okay.
So we know some people have healthier bacteria than others. We know that it's set by about age 2. You're going to be pretty close to a permanent state of the bacteria you have for life. But if someone makes a lifelong or very long-standing change in their diet, can they shift those bacteria away if they have the wrong kind to the good kind? Kombucha is one of those foods that has the potential to be part of that shift because it does contain good bacteria.
What does it actually do that's good for you, or how would it help your GI health?
The bacteria?
Yeah.
So lots of things. And again, the research here is it's exploding right now. One potential area is that they actually essentially coat the lining of the gut to prevent nasty things from infiltrating the gut. So they're almost like a defense mechanism.
Okay.
The other thing is they metabolize different carbohydrates we eat and produce certain byproducts that may actually have all sorts of potential health benefits. Maybe even affecting our metabolism, our weight. Like this goes deep.
Wow.
But the problem is, from my perspective as a dietitian, is we're not yet at the point that I can say, you know, if you have 1 cup of this yogurt and 200 milliliters of kombucha, your gut will improve by this percent. We're years away from that still.
Shannon's asking about GI health, and I'm curious too, because I'm one of those people who I have a mild case of IBS, so I'm conscious of probiotics and things like that. Eating, like I put yogurt in my smoothie, that kind of thing. Do you find, are probiotics useful for people?
There's some good evidence they can be, and so we now do have a clinical practice guideline book that we can use around different supplements that have some decent clinical evidence around their benefit for IBS. If you think you have IBS, I would say, to be clear, see a doctor and make sure you know that what you have is IBS and not something like, say, celiac disease or an inflammatory bowel condition. So make sure that you don't just self-diagnose. And it could be sometimes as simple as just lactose intolerance, where you just developed an inability to digest lactose, which is the milk protein, and that's what's causing your symptoms. Again, long way to go, but yes, there is some evidence we can positively influence IBS symptoms through dietary changes.
Okay, hope that helps you out, Shannon. Okay, this is another one about another diet. This is from Evan Svensson, who's saying, I have had friends who've seen incredible results from the ketosis diet and swear by it, but I'd be concerned about its long-term effects. Is it worthwhile doing it for the short term or the long term?
Oh gosh.
Okay, Evan, good question, but first of all, what the heck is ketosis?
Sure.
What is that diet?
Okay, so it's often known as the ketogenic diet, and it means you
So when we were at the facility where we did the interview, you had a couple guys who were doing this, who were like,
that's right,
I got so much energy, I feel amazing. So what is it, first of all?
Sure. Okay, so in a nutshell, right now as you sit here and you're watching this, your brain is processing all the information that you're seeing and hearing, and it's using glucose, sugar, which is from the family of foods of carbohydrates, as its primary fuel. If you're an athlete and you're running or jumping or throwing, you're also using glucose for your muscles to work. So glucose is sort of the currency of fuel for our body. The premise behind the ketogenic diet is that if we take carbohydrates, which are the things that turn into glucose, away from us for about 3 days or so, a few days at a time, the body will eventually have to find a backup fuel source. Otherwise, it literally cannot function. So it turns out that we can use the fat stores we have on our body to produce a backup energy source called ketones, or ketone bodies. These ketone bodies can fuel the brain and fuel the body as its primary energy source when glucose is absent.
Well, how is this any different than any other low-carb diet, though?
Well, this is a very low-carb diet, and what's distinct about this is that you have to keep the carbs to, I mean, I'm talking close to zero, like to the point of basically no fruit. So just non-starchy vegetables like your leafy greens, maybe some broccoli. That's about it. It's intense. And on top of that, what a lot of people don't realize about the ketogenic diet, you actually can't eat a ton of protein on it either. In the absence of carbohydrates, a high amount of protein will actually turn your body on to producing glucose. So it's a very low carbohydrate diet, moderate protein, and so what are you eating a ton of? Fats, tons. 70 to 80% of your calories. So why it's popular is potentially for weight loss, fat loss. Some people are using it for endurance performance because you become an efficient fat burner. So if you're doing a very long distance run, you can get away with using your own body's fuel sources instead of gels and sports drinks. And there's some research on things like epilepsy and some neurological conditions. It may help. So
shorter, long term, I guess, if you're like trying to fit into a dress or something?
I'd say there's other ways to go about it. I'd say there's other ways. I see its use in the long run therapeutically more than anything, is that it probably will have some uses in clinical settings. Be very careful implementing it just on your own. You need someone who knows what they're doing to support you in the process.
Good question from Jonathan Encarnacion, who would like to know low-carb foods that are also vegan, vegetarian friendly.
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is we have to be careful with saying that carbs are bad. You know, like they've been demonized, but carbs can fit. They absolutely can fit. They're not making us all gain a ton of weight or causing us all to have diabetes. we should be focusing on high quality, nutritious carbs that go into our bloodstream slowly, which I know you and I talked about a lot, versus ones that are highly refined and sugary, white flour, these sorts of things, the candies, the pops, that cause our blood sugar to spike hugely.
Okay.
So if you're vegetarian or vegan, it's challenging to be low carb because a lot of vegetarian vegan protein sources like beans and lentils and chickpeas, not to mention tofu products, contain carbs.
Okay.
They just do. Nuts and seeds contain some protein and are relatively low in carbs.
Okay.
So those would be options. But
There's a
again,
good one for
they're
you,
high in
Jonathan.
calories.
Right.
So I'd say balance would be the approach I would take.
Okay. Natalie J. Penner McCallum would like to know, how are beans for protein?
8 grams for about half a cup.
Okay. And she'd also like to know berries. Every day?
Sure. Yeah. Berries they're a winner. There's no question. They're high in vitamin C. They're very rich in antioxidants. They're high in fiber. They cause a very minimal effect on blood sugar. They're local to Canada, so there's lots of benefit.
I'm so happy to hear her say this because talk to my little snack for later.
Oh, here we go. Oh,
Look how good a student I am. I am showing off. I have berries in there and banana because I went for a long bike ride yesterday. And I feel like I need potassium for later.
Good. I like that. That's good.
My own little.
So berries, but mix it up.
To make up for my muffins, right?
You're recovering.
Yeah.
Mix it up. So strawberries have different properties than blueberries, which have different properties than blackberries. So don't feel like it's just one and the rest of them are wasted. Try a variety of them.
Okay. Another question from, this time, Shane Lewis. Okay, what do you know about moringa?
I'm gonna.
What is that?
It's again one of these superfood berries.
Okay.
And I'm gonna have to say I haven't done a ton of research on it, so I'll take a pass on that one.
Is it like an acai or yeah? Okay. Judith Taylor Norse is asking: is there a huge difference between steel cut oats and quick oats? Great question, because my brother-in-law is hooked on these, and I can't say that I've ever done the steel oat.
You know what's funny about this? This goes back to the issue of nutrition labeling and how a food is more complex than the label. If you look at the amount of calories, carbs, fiber in steel-cut oats, which are basically the oat in its original form, right out of the ground, pretty much all they've pretty much done is slice the oat. It's called a groat technically. So
what do? You same thing, you add boiling water?
Yeah, but you have to cook it for a lot longer.
Okay.
So because, remember we were talking about the seeds and they're still kind of intact and therefore they require more work to digest. The steel cut oat is closer to the form that it came out of the earth. Therefore we have to do some work to make it edible.
Okay.
We have to boil it for 20 or odd minutes or so.
Oh, that's a long time when you
It is,
like
right? Versus like rip, pour it in and you're done. So that's why we invented instant oats, because it's convenient.
Right.
Protein, carbs, fat, calories, all look about the same. But the steel cut oat will raise your blood sugar much more slowly than the instant will. Okay. So if you can, go to the steel cut, but time may be your enemy there.
Okay. Kathy McCormick is asking, Kathy, this is a great question for Marketplace. What's the difference between, what is the difference with eggs? Free run, free range, organic, etc.? So Kathy, Marketplace actually did this show last year. You can see Asha Tomlinson, she actually goes out and visits a couple of chicken farms. They do a taste test. So I'd probably suggest that you watch that. But Jen, any difference in the actual eggs nutritionally speaking?
It really goes back to the feed of what you give the chicken. So what's happening a lot is giving chickens different sources of omega-3 so that you can produce an omega-3 egg. So that's really where you're going to see the biggest change in terms of nutritional profile. So people ask me, is an omega-3 egg worth it, for example? And the answer is there's nowhere near the omega-3 in an egg that there would be in a piece of salmon, like not even close.
Sure.
But if you're someone like me who's allergic to fish, an omega-3 egg may be one of the few ways you can get DHA, which is the active omega-3 that our brain seems to use, into your body.
All right, so if you're just joining us, we are live on Facebook and YouTube. I'm Charlsie Agro, one of the hosts of CBC's Marketplace. We did an investigation into superfoods. If you haven't seen it, I could highly recommend it. We looked at coconut water, chia seeds, and quinoa, but I'm joined by Jen Sygo, who's a registered dietitian. She was featured in the program. She continues to take your questions, and they keep pouring in. So
this is like
I know. Well,
rapid fire, love it.
But it's like nutrition, right? People really care about what they're putting in their bodies. Tina Hayward wants to know, apple cider vinegar, do you recommend it to your clients?
So apple cider vinegar is one of these things of lore where it's been touted. I mean, you can find claims out the wazoo. Everything to do with weight loss, almost like anti-cancer effects, improvements in gut health.
Yeah.
It goes on and on. The research does not yet back up the claims.
Okay.
So I would say it's one of those things, certainly for flavor, like it's got a nice mild quality compared to some of the more intense, like a white vinegar certainly,
Sure.
or even a balsamic. If it has an effect on gut health, you know, again, there's a few tiny little studies that say maybe there's something to a few of the claims. Often when people have been using this one thing traditionally for a long time, there's probably something to it that they figured out.
Yeah.
But I'd say I'm not yet at the point, I'm certainly not at the point where I'm like, use this, you'll lose weight, all good.
Okay.
That's stretching it by a lot.
Okay. Another question about gut health. I feel like this is the new thing, with
Gut,
foods,
yeah.
gut health. Heather Muir is asking, I was told that if I eat one small bowl of sauerkraut every day, you'd be doing good things for your gut and health.
Right.
Truth or fiction? I mean, I love sauerkraut on like a really good sausage or something. But
Right.
I don't know about eating a whole bowl.
My dad's German, so I feel
Okay.
very loyal to
Now
sauerkraut.
everyone's going to write me and say, what's wrong with you? Sauerkraut's amazing.
No,
I do
no.
like it. A bowl just sounds like a lot.
It's an acquired taste, let's be honest.
But could it actually do good things for your gut?
So this goes back to kombucha. So
This is another fermented food, right?
Yes. So if you weren't listening earlier, we were talking about some of the different fermented foods that are out there, and this notion that fermented foods may play a role in your body producing more good bacteria or feeding and promoting good bacteria in your gut. So sauerkraut is part of the same family as the kombucha. Kimchi is another example of that. Even pickles, not necessarily the grocery store variety, but the ones that people have been making in their homes for years, often contain some good bacteria in them. Yogurt, kefir. I find it fascinating because pretty much every culture has fermented foods in their traditional food pattern. There's something to this. You know, this was not only a way to preserve food, but probably people were getting health benefits from it they didn't realize. But we can't yet say that 1 cup a day or 1 bowl a day is going to make you healthy, wealthy, or wise.
Who knows? In 20 years, that could be like
maybe
the new apple a day keeps the doctor away. George Eisner is asking, are there any foods that will help healing after oral surgery? I'm having all my top teeth removed tomorrow. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, George. He's having all his top teeth removed tomorrow, so any foods that could be put into smoothies would be appreciated.
Ooh. Well, I think the first thing is if you are experiencing something like surgery or there's something big happening in terms of your health that you're having to heal from, the biggest determinant of healing time, nutritionally speaking, is a good quality diet. So if you are dealing with nutrient deficiencies, particularly things like protein and zinc, which are part of the actual tissue healing, you'll see healing times will be slowed. So dietitians who work in hospitals do a lot of work to make sure that those people who are coming out of surgery get good nutrition, even if it has to be from a supplement, so that their body can take care of itself. So if we use, say, the protein as an example, smoothie, going back to the protein powder we talked about, whether that's yogurt, like a Greek yogurt, which is high in protein, or a protein powder. And then if we can, get lots of vitamins and minerals, so putting in things like the berries we've talked about. Throw a banana in there, maybe even put in a bit of avocado in there. And I also love to put a bit of greens in my smoothies. And if you're looking for, say, vitamin E, which is an important antioxidant for skin healing as well, throw in a bit of peanut butter or almond butter,
there you go.
which are very high in vitamin E.
Okay. Hopefully that helps you out, and good luck, George, with the surgery. Hope everything goes well. Jerry Sasha is asking, is coconut water healthy? So Jerry,
you should answer
hope
this. Yeah.
that you watched the show. If you haven't yet, you can catch it on YouTube. So what we did with coconut water was we wanted to test one of its claims, which is about hydration. People seem to think it hydrates them better than water. So what I did, Jerry,
you suffered for this. I'd like it to be known.
I ran in a heat-controlled room for an hour. So the first day I drank the coconut water, did the weigh-ins and the testing, and then the second day I did it with tap water. So for me, it turned out that it hydrated me about the same. What's interesting, though, that I learned about coconut water, because I didn't really think about this, I think people hear water. So they assume that it's just water. Well, it turns out, Jerry, there are a couple of things in that coconut water, including calories. So there are carbs and some sugar in there. And the other thing that we learned from our sports scientists that we worked with is that there's also potassium in the coconut water, which is an okay thing, but when you're sweating, you need sodium. So I hope you watch the show. It's great. I'm in a heat-controlled room. It's very exciting, and Jen's also there to help afterwards.
You explained that very well.
I get it. It's kind of one of those healthy. Is it healthy for you?
It's a way to get potassium in your diet, and if you can afford to have 60 or 70 calories per cup of a liquid to get potassium that way, we know people who consume calories from liquids tend to be more prone to weight gain over time because your brain thinks of it as water. So I'd always rather people get their potassium from foods they eat if they can.
Sure.
First. Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us. We've been live on Facebook and YouTube. I'm Charlsie Agro with CBC's Marketplace. Jen Sygo, registered dietitian. Jen, we'll ask you one more question before we let you go. Jose is asking intermittent fasting. What are your thoughts on that?
Got to throw the big one out right at the end. Intermittent fasting, the premise here is let's give our digestive system and our body a rest. So let's either have long periods through the day where we don't eat, not usually during the day, but often we're talking about fasting for as long as 16 hours a day.
Wow.
So you would only eat within an 8-hour window. So if you can imagine maybe eating breakfast at 10 in the morning and dinner by 6 and no calories in between. Or some people are alternating 5 days of normal eating with 2 days of fasting a week. And the idea is maybe it can help you with weight loss, maybe it can help you your gut, maybe it gets less irritated, it's not having to work as hard. And the evidence, I would say, sort of like the ketogenic diet, it's one of these niche things that might work for some.
Okay.
The weight loss evidence says that it can be as effective, but not necessarily any more effective than old-fashioned keeping an eye on your calories.
Right.
So if it's right for you, fine, I'll support a client with that. I think it's a niche thing for certain people. For the rest of us, let's just eat a balanced diet.
Okay. Well, Jen, thank you, first of all, for working with us. I think our whole team learned an incredible amount of food, incredible amount about food and nutrition and taking care of ourselves. I would just ask you maybe to close, is there anything from our superfoods work that you are sort of, that maybe surprised you, or your takeaway thoughts that you want to leave people with?
Well, I think carrots are good for you. So it always comes back to, for me, is that there's so many foods that are, inexpensive, they're accessible, they're local foods that are so nutritious. And I think it's great that we are exploring new foods and expanding the variety of foods that we now are choosing. That's exciting. 20 years ago, nobody was talking about kale. And avocados were seen as high in fat and therefore bad for you.
Right.
So I love that we're challenging ourselves, but I think we have to also remember there's a lot of tried and true Canadian staples that are deserving of our attention and our affection. And food should always be fun. So we don't want it to be obsessive, we don't want it to be punitive, we don't want it to waste your money unnecessarily. So, you can make an outstanding meal with good Canadian local food, save a few bucks, retire early. Send me a check in the mail. That's a joke. And we'll all retire to the islands where we'll eat our fancy berries together.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Jen, again, thank you so much for all your time throughout the investigation and then for the hour that we've been live on Facebook and YouTube. So we will leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching Marketplace. Thank you for participating this afternoon. And as always, any more questions, comments, you can always send us an email, marketplace@cbc.ca, and we will leave it there this afternoon. Thanks again for taking part. It was great.